What would you do if the face you buried half a century ago smiled back at you from across the dinner table? I am 80 years old, and I've learned that some truths tend to stay buried no matter how deep you put them. 3 weeks ago, my granddaughter stood in my kitchen, laughing about something trivial, and the room went quiet inside my head. Not because of what she said, but because of how she looked when she tilted her chin and narrowed her eyes. That exact angle, that exact expression, I had seen it before in 1974. Under moonlight, while holding a shovel, I promised myself I would forget. For 50 years, I convinced myself memory was fragile, that faces blur, that guilt reshapes the past. But this wasn't vague recognition. This was precision. The curve of the mouth, a faint asymmetry near the left eye, even the way she paused before speaking, as if measuring danger. My hands started shaking, and I told myself it was age. That's what we do. When the past knocks, we blame time. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing dirt falling, hearing breath stop, replaying the lie I told the police, the lie I told my wife, the lie I told myself so I could keep living like an ordinary man. I wasn't supposed to recognize anything anymore. The woman I buried wasn't supposed to exist beyond that night. She wasn't supposed to echo into the future wearing my bloodline. Back then, it was a different world. Small town, quiet roads, the kind of place where secrets didn't travel far because everyone agreed not to carry them. What happened was labeled an accident, a tragedy with no culprit. The file was closed. The town moved on, and I built a life on top of that silence. Marriage, children, respectability. The kind that looks clean from the outside, but secrets age differently than people. They wait, they observe, they choose their moment. And when my granddaughter laughed again, I felt something crack that had been sealed for decades. Because recognition, isn't just visual. It's moral. It's the body remembering what the mind tried to erase. I know what you're thinking. Faces repeat. Genetics play tricks. But some resemblances aren't inherited. They are returned. And once that idea took hold, every memory I buried started pushing back, demanding space, demanding breath, demanding confession. If you're still listening right now, it's because something in this story unsettled you. And that matters. Secrets like this don't survive for 50 years unless everyone chooses not to look too closely. Understanding stories like mine isn't about entertainment. It's about recognizing how ordinary people, in ordinary moments, become part of truths that should never have stayed hidden. If this confession made you uneasy, confused, or curious, I want you to say something. Leave a comment and tell me what you would have felt if you were in my place. Would you have stayed silent? Would you have buried it deeper? Or would you have spoken sooner, knowing what it might cost? Your comments matter more than you think. They turn a hidden confession into a shared reckoning. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard before they disappear forever, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Not for me, but so these final confessions don't vanish the same way the truth almost did. Now the question is simple. In 1974, I wasn't an old man haunted by memories. I was 30 years old, newly married, working nights, trying to stay invisible in a town where being noticed could ruin you. That night didn't begin like a crime. It began like a favor. A phone call after midnight, a voice I recognized but hadn't heard in years. Tight, rushed, afraid. He didn't explain much, just said something had gone wrong and he needed help. I remember looking at my wife asleep beside me and deciding not to wake her. That decision still follows me. When I arrived, the air smelled like wet soil and gasoline. The car was parked off a dirt road I'd driven 100 times. Headlights off, trunk open, and her not moving, not screaming, just still in a way that told me I was already too late to fix anything. I didn't ask what happened. That was the first lie. Silence disguised as shock. She wasn't a stranger. That's what makes this harder to say. I knew her name. I knew her laugh. I knew she had been asking questions she shouldn't have been asking. About people everyone trusted. About things that were never written down. In those days, curiosity could be dangerous if it drifted too close to the wrong men. They said it was an accident. They said she fell. They said no one would ever question it if the body was found where it made sense. I told myself I wasn't killing anyone. I was just helping clean up what had already happened. That's how ordinary people justify extraordinary wrongs. We shrink our role until it fits inside something we can live with. We dug for hours. The ground was stubborn, like it knew what we were doing. My hands blistered. My back screamed. At one point, I almost stopped. Almost said this was wrong. Almost walked away. But fear is persuasive. Fear of being seen. Fear of being connected. Fear of becoming the next problem that needed to be solved. When it was done, we stood there in silence. No prayers, no names spoken. Just dirt covering a truth that wasn't allowed daylight. The next morning, the story was already forming. An accident. A disappearance. Authorities nodded along. The town absorbed it and moved on. And so did I. Or, at least, I pretended to. For decades, I told myself the past was finished. That the dead stay buried, but secrets don't rot the way bodies do. They preserve themselves inside you, waiting for a moment of weakness, a familiar face, a laugh in a kitchen that shouldn't sound familiar at all. The official story appeared 2 days later, neat and bloodless, the kind of explanation that gives people permission to stop asking questions. They said she'd lost control of her car on a wet curve. They said she must have panicked. They said there were no signs of a struggle, no reason to suspect anything more. What they didn't say was how quickly the conclusion was reached or how little interest there was in verifying it. In 1974, authority didn't need evidence. It needed agreement. I remember reading the local paper with my coffee, my hands steady in a way that scared me. The details were wrong, but not wrong enough to raise suspicion. Dates slightly off. Times rounded. A witness who hadn't actually seen anything, just heard a noise. The kind of distortions that don't scream lie, but whisper convenience. People accepted it because acceptance was easier than curiosity. What still chills me is how many people knew the story was thin and chose not to pull on it. A deputy who looked at the ground when I passed him in the grocery store. A clerk at the records office who told me, quietly, that some files had been misplaced. No one ordered the truth to be buried. It happened the way it always does. Through small acts of compliance. Through the shared understanding that some answers create more problems than they solve. She wasn't just a victim of an accident. She was a problem that needed closing. She had been asking about money that didn't add up, about men who wore respectability like armor, about events everyone pretended were unrelated. When someone like that disappears, the truth becomes inconvenient. And inconvenient truths don't survive long. For years, I told myself the distortion wasn't my responsibility. I didn't write the report. I didn't sign the death certificate. I didn't stand behind the podium and reassure the town. But silence has weight. And every year I stayed quiet. I added another layer of dirt on top of her name. Now, watching my granddaughter move through the world with that same careful awareness, that same instinct to notice what others ignore, I wonder if truth has a way of resurfacing through blood, through time, through faces that refuse to stay forgotten. Maybe history doesn't repeat itself. Maybe it waits. For most of my life, I believed I had kept the damage contained, that what happened in 1974 stayed where it belonged, underground, unfinished. Families grow, years pass, and you convince yourself that bloodlines move forward untouched. I was wrong. The connection didn't announce itself dramatically. It arrived quietly through patterns I had trained myself not to see. It started with questions, innocent ones at first. My granddaughter asking about old photographs, about places that no longer existed, about names that never appeared in family albums. She had a habit of noticing gaps, the same way that woman did decades ago. Most people look at what's present. She looked at what was missing. Every time she did, my chest tightened in a way no doctor ever explained. Then there were the coincidences that weren't coincidences anymore. A birth date that aligned too closely. A hospital record that didn't make sense when placed next to a marriage certificate. A relative whose story changed depending on who was listening. Families are built on repetition, but they're also built on edits. Someone decides what gets remembered and what gets quietly erased. I began reviewing documents late at night, telling myself it was harmless curiosity. Old letters, property records, church registries, the kind of paperwork no one checks because it feels settled. That's when the pattern sharpened. Names altered slightly. Addresses reused. A child listed as stillborn in one ledger, but absent entirely in another. The same year, the same county, the same silence. The truth landed slowly, like pressure behind the eyes. What we buried didn't stay buried because it wasn't finished with us. Lines crossed generations. Choices made by frightened adults don't dissolve. They traveu. They embed themselves into families, reshaping futures without asking permission. I wasn't just a witness to their secret anymore. I was its carrier. That realization broke something in me. Because guilt is one thing when it's personal. It's another when you understand you passed it on. That my children grew up on top of a lie they never agreed to. That my granddaughter's existence might be tangled with a truth she was never meant to inherit. I looked at her differently after that, not with suspicion, but with fear. Fear that the past was repeating its interest. Fear that curiosity, once again, would place someone I loved close to something dangerous. And fear that this time, silence wouldn't protect anyone. If this part made you think about your own family history, leave a comment with one word. Inheritance, lies, or truth. At first, I tried to be rational. Faces echo through families. Peopli told me. Genetics recycle expressions. That's what men like me say when the truth feels too heavy to lift. But resemblance isn't just about appearance. It's about behavior. And behavior doesn't lie as easily as photographs do. I began noticing things I couldn't unsee. The way my granddaughter paused before entering a room, scanning it without realizing she was doing it. The way she listened more than she spoke, storing information quietly. Even the way she reacted to authority, polite on the surface, skeptical underneath. I had watched those same instincts half a century ago, in a woman who understood danger long before anyone admitted it existed. Then there were the physical details. A small scar near the wrist, identical in placement and shape. A birthmark low on the shoulder blade that I remembered because I helped cover it with dirt. People will tell you scars can repeat, but memory has a precision fear sharpens. Mine never dulled. The breaking point came one afternoon when she laughed, caught herself, and went silent. That exact sequence, joy interrupted by restraint. I remembered asking that woman once why she did that. She told me she learned early that happiness made you visible. Visibility attracted attention. Attention attracted consequences. Hearing my granddaughter explain the same instinct in different words made my knees give out. I started comparing timelines obsessively. Ages, movements, medical records that didn't line up cleanly. A pregnancy no one talked about. A disappearance framed as convenience. It wasn't one detail that convinced me. It was accumulation. Truth doesn't arrive dramatically. It suffocates denial piece by piece. What terrified me most wasn't the resemblance itself. It was what it implied. That the woman we buried may not have been finished. That what we believed was an ending might have been a transfer. That identity, like guilt, can be reshaped and passed forward when survival demands it. I began to understand something cruel. We didn't just distort the truth. We fractured it, and fractured truths don't disappear. They wait for someone with the right face, the right questions, the right moment to pull them back. Together. Silence isn't just the absence of speech. It's a structure you build around yourself, brick by brick, until it becomes safer to live inside it than to step outside. For 50 years, I told myself I stayed quiet because it was already too late, because speaking wouldn't bring anyone back, because reopening the past would only create new victims. Those were the respectable reasons. The real one was simpler. I was afraid. Fear ages with you. It doesn't fade. It matures. In my 30s, I was afraid of prison, of losing my wife, of being exposed as something other than decent. In my 40s and 50s, fear shifted into routine. I had children, a mortgage, a reputation. Silence became maintenance, something you performed daily without thinking, like locking a door. There were moments I almost broke. In the late 80s, when a journalist passed through town asking questions about old cases. In the 90s, when records were being digitized and someone called to verify dates. Each time, the truth rose to the surface, and each time I pushed it back down by doing nothing. Silence doesn't require effort. It requires permission. And I kept granting it to myself. As I aged, the lie evolved. It stopped feeling like something I was hiding and started feeling like something that defined me. I wasn't just a man who knew a secret. I was the man who kept it. That role became my identity. Admitting the truth would have meant admitting that most of my adult life was built on avoidance. People my age don't like to dismantle themselves. But there was another reason I never said out loud. Loyalty. Not to the dead, but to the living who depended on the lie. Exposing the truth would have implicated people who went on to raise families, hold office, earn trust. I told myself I was protecting others. The truth is, I was protecting the version of the world that allowed me to sleep. Now, at 80, fear has changed again. It's quieter, less urgent. What replaces it is weight. The weight of knowing time is running out, and silence no longer feels neutral. Silence feels like a decision I keep making, and every decision has consequences. Seeing my granddaughter with that face, those instincts, that quiet awareness forced something on me I'd avoided my entire life. A deadline. Not imposed by the law, not by the town, by mortality. There is a difference between living with a secret and dying with one. One is cowardice. The other is theft. Telling the truth. This late doesn't undo anything. That's the lie people use to justify silence, and it's the hardest one to let go of. I know nothing I say now will resurrect the past or correct every wrong decision layered on top of it. But what it does change is ownership. For 50 years, the truth owned me. Now, for the first time, I am choosing to own it. The moment I accepted that, everything shifted, not externally, internally. The fear didn't disappear, but it lost its authority, because secrets thrive on the belief that exposure is worse than consequence. And eti consequences look different. Prison is frightening, yes. Judgment is painful, but dying while still hiding feels unbearable in a way I never understood when I was younger. What this truth changes most is how the story ends. For decades, the woman we buried was reduced to a footnote, an inconvenience erased by paperwork and silence. Now she becomes a person again, someone whose questions mattered, someone whose curiosity wasn't reckless, just early. History doesn't only belong to the powerful. It belongs to the witnesses who finally speak. For my family, the impact is quieter but deeper. They inherit honesty instead of omission. They inherit context instead of confusion. My granddaughter deserves to know why certain silences exist in our family, why some rooms feel heavier than others, why truth sometimes arrives late but still demands acknowledgement. Secrets rot families from the inside. Truth, even when painful, gives them a chance to breathe. There is also a moral reckoning that doesn't end with confession. Saying the truth doesn't absolve me. It defines me. It forces me to live my remaining days without the comfort of denial. That is the price, and it should be. Confession isn't about relief. It's about responsibility arriving at the last possible moment. If you've stayed with this story until now, I want you to reflect on something. Silence always feels neutral until time reveals who it protected and who it harmed. If you carry a truth that isn't yours alone, ask yourself how long you plan to keep deciding for others. If you're still here, it means you didn't just listen to a story. You carried it, and that matters more than you know. Confessions like this were never meant to be easy to hear, only necessary to tell. Staying until the end means you are willing to face discomfort, silence, and the weight of a truth that waited 50 years to breathe. If stories like this resonate with you, stories that feel like secret diaries, buried truths, and final confessions, make sure you subscribe to this channel. This is where the stories that were never supposed to be told finally come out. Before you go, I want you to comment one word only. I heard it. That comment isn't for me. It's a marker, proof that this truth didn't vanish again. And if this story kept you thinking, questioning, or unsettled, leave a like so more people who crave real mysteries and hidden truths can find it. Now, don't stop here. The next video appearing on your screen holds another confession, another ordinary life tied to an extraordinary secret. Watch it while the silence is still broken.